Chapter 8, Part 2 of The Seven Stairs by Stuart Brent. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8, On the Avenue, Part 2. In spite of all our efforts, the lectures and concerts in our downstairs room did not continue to draw indefinitely. Sometimes we couldn't get 50 people to come out of an evening to hear good music for free, and one of the finest chamber groups in the city was providing us with a series just for the chance to play. Saturday afternoons were idle. People seemed to have become too busy to spend time in simple conversation. Book sales dropped too. Price cutting hurt the psychiatric mail order business, although we held out for several years. Finally, we discontinued the catalog, in spite of its definitive value as a listing of significant books in this field. Again, something new had to be done, and done quickly. I decided to go after business and industrial accounts, and to persuade them to give books instead of whiskey for Christmas presents. My successes included selling a bank 250 copies of the Columbia Encyclopedia, with the name of each recipient stamped in gold on the cover. I'm not sure this did much for the human spirit, but it helped pay the rent. One afternoon, Ben Cartman came in with a friend who had some ideas about Brent and television. They arranged an audition, I was accepted, and for almost a year I had a 15-minute afternoon show sandwiched between a program on nursing and one on cooking. Financially, it was a disaster. I was paid scale, which at that time was $120 per week. And after I paid my union dues and my agent's fees, most of the cost of the extra help I had to hire to cover the shop during my absences came right out of my own pocket. But I did learn this: be very careful what you sign. Reread the small print, and be sure to see your lawyer. Lessons that would be helpful when television again beckoned in ways to be fully described in another chapter. Every morning as I turned the key in the lock and entered the shop, my heart sank. Each day brought trouble, process servers, trips to the lawyer. This was what came from entering a retail business without a financial cushion, and especially a business that demanded a large stock. For every book I sold, I had to buy 3. 3 books it might take months to sell. Sometimes I could visualize the credit managers sitting down for a meeting. Their agenda? Let's get Brent. There was nothing to do but fight it out, worry it out, dream it out. I have said disparaging things about the publishing industry, and shall say more. But it was publishers and their representatives who, in large measure, saw me through. There was Robert Fitzhenry from Harper, now some kind of an executive, then one of the top salesmen in the business. He reminded one of Hemingway's description of Algren. Watch out for him, or he will kill you with a punch. At one time, you'd have thought from the titles on the shelves that I was a branch store for Harper. There was Joe Reiner from Crown Publishers, one of the first to sell me books out of New York. He, too, has graduated into the executive category. He taught me many things about the book business, and it was he who arranged for me to buy old book fixtures from the late Dorothy Gottlieb, the vivid, marvelous proprietress of the Ambassador Bookstore. Bennett Cerf, master showman of the industry, gave me a measure of prestige when I needed it by making me an editor, along with Jesse Stein, of the psychiatric division of Random House. I was able to help their list with a number of important works by Chicago analysts. Over the years, people like Ken McCormick, Michael Bessie, Pat Knopf Jr., Ed Hodge, Richard Grossman, Gene Healy, Peter Fields, Bob Gurney, Max Meyerson, Bella Mell, Bill Fallon, and Hardwick Mosley became more than business acquaintances and left their imprint on my life as well as upon my adventures in the book world. But more about that world later. As business improved, and as the light gradually became visible through the turbid waters in which I seemed immersed, my energies became increasingly focused upon the simple matter of keeping going, the business of each day's problems, each month's decisions, each year's gains. Work and living have a way of closing in around one's being so completely that when fate strikes through this envelopment, it comes as a stunning surprise. Fate does not care for what has been the object of one's personal concern, and it seldom sends a letter or telegram to announce its arrival. It had been just another day. Jenny had complained of a headache and some difficulty in focusing. In the afternoon we saw a doctor, and in the evening an eye specialist. Evidently it was not glaucoma. Nonetheless, we administered some eye drops and some pills. I fell asleep in the living room in my chair that night, and was awakened early in the morning by 3 small children, vaguely perturbed, dragging their blankets behind them. Jenny was dead. Death is not saying goodbye. One can no more say goodbye to death than to a statue or a wall. There is nothing to say goodbye to. It is too natural and final to be dealt with in any of the artificial, temporizing ways with which we pretend to conduct relations with reality. My first impulse was to run, sell the store for whatever I could get, pack up my things and leave. Take off perhaps for the little fishing village of Bark Point on the northern tip of Wisconsin, where we had a summer place, and there retire in solitude and raise the children as best I could. It was Bob Corman who got me to quit trying to react to death and to just go ahead and mourn. Death has no face, is no audience, has nothing to do with reaction. It is the life of the individual that demands everything, cries out to be lived, and if mourning is a part of this, go ahead. So I stayed where I was and worked and mourned, until one day the pain of loss stopped altogether. Michael Seller had come over to the apartment one night and talked to me. "For one thing," he begged, "don't let irritations and problems pile up. Resolve them from day to day. And another thing, no matter what the cost, come home every night for supper. Never let a day or night go by without seeing your children and talking with them." I followed Mike's advice to the letter. Every night I was home for dinner at 6 o'clock, even though I might have to leave later and return to the store. My routine was established. I ate, slept, and worked, and after store hours I gave myself to the problems that beset all parents of small children, changing diapers and being concerned over unexpected rashes and fevers in the night. I remembered Tolstoy's answer to the question, "When is a man free?" A man is free when he recognizes his burden, like the ox that recognizes its yoke. I learned that I was not alone. It was not only old friends like Claire Sampson bringing over a turkey for our dinner, or Lolly Wexler early one wintry morning unbuttoning the hood about her blonde hair and flushed with the cold and her own tremendous effort, saying ever so softly, "Can I help?" It was also people I scarcely knew, such as the strange man whose name I invariably forgot, but who dressed so elegantly, a stick-pin in his tie, his mustache beautifully trimmed, a small flower in his lapel, and who called everybody Kid. He came in now on a wet November night and bought some detective stories. To my astonishment, when I handed him the books, he began to weep. The tears were irresistible, so I looked at him and wept also. "You're a sweet kid," he said, strangling, and turned and left the shop. There was Marvin Glass, a genius at toy design, devoted like man's Herr Settembrini to the total encompassment of human knowledge. I almost had to hire a girl to take care of his special orders alone, dispatching telegrams, night letters, even cablegrams for books he wanted yesterday. He spoke in confidential whispers, but his expression was always so precise that you invariably found yourself watching carefully over every word you uttered in response. There was Bert Liss, who wore the most beautiful coats I had ever seen and a fantastic series of elegant hats. A Tyrolean hat, a checkered cap, a Cossack fur hat, a dashing black Homburg. Whenever he went crazy over a book, at least 20 of his friends would order a copy. But more than that, he was a gentleman, firm in his belief in the goodness of man. Sidney Morris, the architect who helped design the interior of the shop and never sent a bill, was there, not only to buy, but more important, whenever I needed someone to confide in. There was Oscar Getz, Oscar in vaguely Prince Albert dress, forgetting a life of business and civic responsibility the moment he entered the world of letters. Upon encounter with ideas, his eyes lit up and his body began to quiver. There was no doubt about his ability to entrance his listeners. Once, while driving him home after an evening spent at a small cafe listening to gypsy music, I became so absorbed in what he was saying that I was presented with tickets for 2 traffic violations, one for failing to stop at a red light, and another for going in the wrong direction down a one-way street. Another scholarly businessman, Philip Pinsoff, came in with his brothers, Oscar and Eddie, and together they made it clear that I was being cared for. In later years, I was to enjoy Sabbath dinners at the Pinsoffs, where Phil's wife was a most gracious hostess who would seat her husband on a red pillow as if to say, "For 5 days you have received the slings and arrows of the marketplace, but on Friday night you are as a king in your own home." George Lurie came not only to buy books, but to regale me with stories, such as the episode in which he attended the Board of Governors meeting of a major university, and was invited to sign a book in which each guest had inscribed not only his name, but his alma mater. George wrote his name in the book and cryptically added H and M. The gentleman sitting next to him asked, "Harvard and what? Massachusetts Institute of Technology?" "No," said George, "Halsted and Maxwell," the address of Chicago's famous and still extant open-air market. Everett Kovler, president of the Jim Beam Whiskey Company, made it clear to me that I could call him and say, "Everett, I need a sale." There were times when I did, and he always replied, "Fine, send it." Another official of the same firm, George Gaber, was also my benefactor. Through a strange twist of fate, he was able to cancel a debt that plagued me, muttering under his breath as he bought a book, "About that. It's all been washed out." While the kindness of my customers served to cheer my heart no little, my peace of mind was greatly augmented by the personal friendship and professional concern of Dr. Arthur Shafton, the kind of pediatrician who would come to the house at a moment's notice to treat bleeding or feverish children and soothe their hysterical father, the kind of physician who views medicine as an art. Sometimes, when he dropped into the shop, he would take me in hand too, suggesting, "Perhaps you ought to go home now. You look tired." For a brief time I also thought I had found a gem of an office girl. She was certainly unique and physically striking, a high-breasted young creature at least 6 feet tall, who responded to instructions by taking a deep breath, blinking her gray-blue eyes, and intoning, "Will do." Then she would wheel on her spike heels, pick up her knees with an elevation that threatened to strike her chin, and walk away, a marvel of strange symmetry. She was the most obedient employee I ever had, and the tidiest. My desk was always clean as a whistle. But when the time came for the month's billings, I could find no accounts. I rushed to Miss Will Do in consternation. She fluttered her lashes and said, "I threw them away." That was how she kept my desk so clean. As Christmas approached, the consideration and generosity of my friends and customers became positively orgiastic. Ruth Weiss called and said, "I'm telling everyone I know to send books and records for Christmas," and apparently they did so. I have never seen so many art books sold at one time as on the day Dr. Freund and his wife Geraldine came in. Dr. Freund kept saying, "Lovely, I must have it," to everything I showed him, until I became thoroughly embarrassed, and still he persisted in buying more. Sidney Morris sent books to all his architect friends, and the purchases of Maury Rosenfeld were so prodigious that May Goodman, my floor manager, was left speechless. The gentle Ira Rubel spent hours making copious selections, saying quizzically of each purchase, "Do you really think this is the most suitable?" A.N. Pritzker, Jack's brother, made one of his rare appearances and bought records. A little classical, a little operatic, a little ballet, a little jazz, a little popular, until he had a stack 3 feet high which he insisted upon paying for on the spot, although we were really too busy to figure up the amount. It went like this day after day until my embarrassment at so much kindness and my inability to know what to say or do about it became almost too much. Late at night I would lie awake thinking about all these people rallying about me, and then my embarrassment turned to humble acceptance of so much caring, so much human warmth. End of chapter 8.
Please subscribe to update new videos. Please share and like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much.